All right, so today we are going to talk a little bit about Andrew Jackson. So what we need to discuss is we are going to discuss if he was Democratic. And I don't mean this in the terms of Democrat versus Republican, or in this case, maybe Democrat, Republican versus Federalist. But we are discussing if he made the United States a little bit better for democracy as a whole. So before you get to this point, you should know about the Louisiana Purchase. You should know about the War of 1812. You should know a little bit about um, the Lewis and Clark and moving westward. And then we're going to start around 1820 is the year we started. Before we start with Andrew Jackson, we need to talk about what it means to be democratic. So a democracy is ruling by the majority, where people have the power. This is what we live in today. There's a lot of different types of it around the world, but generally you put power in the people's hands. Democratic, which is on the right side, means you're appealing to the broad mass of people. You are appealing to the most people. You're being democratic. You're getting the majority of people to approve of what you're doing, making people equal. That's what it means to be democratic. So going on is, was Andrew Jackson democratic? Means in this case, did he make things more equal, or did he appeal to the most people? And that's where we're going to be going with this. So we have to understand who Andrew Jackson is. He is a myth and legend and movie character brought to life. He's insane. So he serves in the Revolutionary War. And when I say by served, was he was like 12, and he was running mail for the Revolutionary War. He was running mail and errands. He was a little errand boy during the Revolutionary War for the rebels. And he apparently talks smacked to a British officer and got his ear cut off, or got hurt by that person. He becomes an orphan at 14 because of the war. And then later on, he becomes Tennessee's first representative. So he becomes the first person to be representing Tennessee in Congress. Later on, he becomes a leader of their army, the militia. Militia is a fancy word for a state army. So what this means is that during this time, America's expanding. Tennessee is the farthest west state in the Union, one of them. There's a lot of Native American groups. There's still British regiments in that area. There are still French regiments, Spanish, all these kind of groups that might be hostile, and he's in charge of Tennessee's army. During the War of 1812, he gets put as the military general for that area. He makes these insane battles on Native American groups throughout the area. One of these battles is part of the Creek War, where he fought this Native American group called the Creeks. And it was really violent. It was really terrible. There were stories of, I think it was Native American groups raiding cities and cutting open pregnant women and killing them. And then there were stories of American soldiers attacking Native American groups in equally horrible and brutal ways. It was really bad. War of 1812 finishes, and then he fights the last battle, which is the Battle of New Orleans. He's the general there. He wins this amazing victory, and where he loses very little men and he kills tens of thousands of British troops, and he basically becomes a celebrity. He becomes very famous because of this battle. And then other things he did is he was also in charge during the Seminole War. The Seminoles is a group Native American group in Florida. Today, the Florida State University mascot is a Seminole. So a little bit of historical mascot, which is cool. But anyway, he fights in another Native American war. This dude did not like Native Americans. He had a tooth necklace made out of Native American teeth of different groups that he's fought and conquered. There's a story where he preserved the head of a Native American general, or an ear of a Native American general, and kept it in a jar in his house in Tennessee. And his story is he adopted a Native American baby of one of the battles or raids, and he didn't let it die. He wanted to adopt it as a son. This dude's weird. This dude's the president version of the Tiger King guy. He's really out there. Moving on. Okay, I don't want to do this anymore. Moving on to the next slide. Let me clear these annotations. So moving on, this dude's a myth. Like, straight up, this dude is the Joe Exotic Tiger King of all presidents. He's what Trump like wants to be like. So one time, he gets challenged to a duel, and this guy, the guy who challenges him, is this guy who's won like 20 duels, and he's this super marksman, deadly, don't mess with this guy type of person who challenges Jackson to a duel. And Jackson says, all right, you're on. And Jackson's saying, all right, I have a plan for this. So his plan was to get shot. And then a rule of dueling was that once you shoot, you can't move until the other person's shot. So Jackson's plan was, I'm going to get shot by this person, and then he can't move, and then I have all the time in the world to shoot him back and kill him. And it works. He gets shot in the chest, he doesn't die, and then looks at the other dude, shoots him square in the face, or in the chest, and he kills him instantly. Gnarly dude. Anyway, so yeah, he survives the duel. He gets cut with a sword during the Revolutionary War when he was 13, and like lives and ends up making it, surviving. And then during one of the wars, he gets shot in the shoulder and then just goes back to fighting the next day, like nothing happened. And the last thing is this assassination attempt, where he's president at this time. This is the first assassination attempt in American history. And this dude right here comes up to him with a gun and goes to shoot him, and then the gun doesn't work. So he pulls out a second gun and goes to shoot Jackson, and both guns don't work. So Andrew Jackson, who's about, should be dead, takes his cane and beats the crap out of this assassin that was trying to kill him until people can pull him off of the assassin. That's incredible. Like, this never happens today. They actually tested both of the pistols that he used, and both of them worked 100 out of 100 times when they were testing them afterwards. So it's pretty outstanding what this guy did. I think God just didn't want him to die either, or God was afraid of him or something, which is pretty nutty. So I want you to take a second, and I want you to ask yourself, why do you think Andrew Jackson is so appealing? I want you to pause this video and take about 10, 20 seconds to think of a response. You can write it in your notes if you're taking notes, and just think like, okay, why might this guy be very democratic? All right, I'm moving on. Okay, so moving on. We now need to look at him running for president, and we need to think of who votes at this time. So during this time, the only people that could vote are white male landowners. You got to own land, you got to be white, and you got to be male. That's it. That is not a good percentage of the population. So think of the monopoly man. But things start to change as after the War of 1812, after more people are working, after not as many people own land, things start to change. So in later elections, they decide to change, most of the states decide to change their state laws to say that, okay, you don't need to be a landowner. You don't need to be rich to vote anymore. The only qualifications we're going to make is you got to be white and you got to be male. So the idea of this was the common man gets to vote, your common person. So your average Joe is now able to vote. And Andrew Jackson, due to this like mythological status, gets a lot of support from the common man. And he really starts to get very popular. So we're going to flash forward to 1824, and we're going to have some drama. See my little Danny DeVito down there because he's the best. Moving on, election 1824. So you have 4 candidates, and this is very different from elections today, where almost 99% of the time we only have 2 candidates. So this is going to be very different. We have Henry Clay, who lives in Kentucky. He is supported by the West. So you generally, during this time from like 1820 to 1860, you're going to have a West candidate. Oh my God, this is awful. Oh, I have the drawing of like a kindergartner. So this guy is going to be Clay. Clay. Henry Clay is supported by the West, and he is a very important person during this entire stretch from like 1820 to 1860. He like glues the country together. And then aside from that, let me see if I can move this bar. I don't think I can. Aside from that, you have John Quincy Adams, and he is supported by the North. And he is the son of President John Adams earlier in America's history. He's a very well-known person. The North really likes him. So in the North, and I'm going to keep this one blue actually. In the North, we have John Quincy Adams, JQA. And then we have two kind of people in the South. This says that Andrew Jackson is supported by the West. He's also supported by a good amount of the South as well. So he really is very popular down there. So in the West, you have Jackson. I'm going to put Jack. And then in the South, and I'm going to change my color for the South. In the South, you are going to have two people. You're going to have Jackson, and then you're going to have this guy Crawford. If you're wondering why Crawford High School is named what it is, this might be the guy. I don't know why, but a lot of high schools are named after him. So William Crawford is from Georgia. He is supported by the South. He likes slavery. Slavery is important to him. He wants to protect slavery, and he's pretty well known already. So you have these four jabronis running around running for president. And then, so the way it works during this time, let me clear these drawings. If you ever need to go back, you can go back. So the way it worked during this time with four people running for election is when you run for president, you have to have 50% of the vote. Let me draw out 50 for you. So you need 50% of the vote to become the president of the United States. That's not the popular vote. You need 50% of the Electoral College, the EC. And I went on a rant about how stupid this was because it's ridiculous, but you need 50% Electoral College to vote for you. So the way the Electoral College worked was every state gets at least 2 members because of the Senate, where every state gets 2 senators in the Senate. And then you get at least 1 from the House, and you add on however many representatives you have in the House of Representatives. So you have the Senate plus the House. However many representatives you have is however many people you have in the Electoral College. So you can see like Mississippi doesn't have many people at this time. It only has 3. So it has 1 representative from the House and 2 from the Senate. Meanwhile, Massachusetts has 15. Pennsylvania has 28. These bigger cities have a lot more they have a lot more people, so they have more representatives. We know from our southern unit that the 3/5 compromise counted every slave as 3/5 of a person. So the southern states that have slaves, they get their slaves partially get counted as well. So we see that, and I'm going to switch to, let's go green. We can see that the green is Jackson. The tan is Adams, who's the North. And you can see, okay, the South more or less supports Andrew Jackson for president. And then the common men in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and these more agrarian or farmy areas also like Jackson too. They really like him. So your average Joe really likes Andrew Jackson. A few people like Crawford that own slaves, maybe they're a little more politically in depth with everything. You have a few Westerners go for Henry Clay, which is the orange ones, and then you have basically the entire North voting for John Quincy Adams. So you can see, okay, if we were to be Democratic, we would understand that if we look at the popular vote, Andrew Jackson clearly has most people's support. He should be president. And then if you look at the Electoral College, it's the same. He has most of the people's support. He should be president. But that's not how it turns out. So what happens, and let me clear all these. So what happens is because you need 50% to be president, it goes to a runoff. So what ends up happening, and let's see if okay, no, it doesn't say it. So what ends up happening is they take the top 2 candidates, which would be Jackson and John Quincy Adams. And they decide to have a runoff election. So you're either going to vote for Jackson or you're either going to vote for Adams. One of those 2 is going to win. But remember this guy, Henry Clay? I'm going to go back to him. Remember this jabroni, Henry Clay? This guy over here? What he says is he says to the United States, and more importantly, the people that are in charge of voting, Henry Clay says, I support John Quincy Adams. I think all of you that voted for me, Henry Clay, should vote for John Quincy Adams instead, just so that Andrew Jackson doesn't win, because Clay doesn't want him to be president. This is the equivalent if, like, who ran for ASBA president this year? Chris, Braden, and I think Linda was VP. But let's pretend Linda ran for president. Let's say Linda said, okay, I know I can't win, but I would rather Braden be president over Chris. I think all of you that were going to vote for me, don't vote for me. Vote for Braden instead. So he wins. And that's what happens. So his supporters end up calling this a corrupt bargain and are super mad about it. Oh, I did have this written down. Oh, I'm a dummy. Yeah. Oh, and then Clay also says to John Quincy Adams, if you make me Secretary of State, which is a part of the cabinet, I will support you and help you win the election. So Clay is also the leader of, of the House. So Clay is the leader of the House of Representatives who is deciding who wins the presidency. He makes this bribe essentially with John Adams so that he wins the election, so that Adams wins the election and Clay becomes Secretary of State and Jackson's in the corner to cry alone. And this is like political thievery. This is like an episode of Downton Abbey or House of Cards or any of these like things like that. I want to see next year in the ASB presidency if I can convince the current 7th graders to do this, because it'd be really funny. Long story short, John Quincy Adams wins in a landslide due to Henry Clay's shenanigans, and it becomes like the biggest robbery ever. And Jackson is pissed. That's his evil eyes and evil eyebrows. So he says, this is a corrupt bargain. I was robbed of the presidency, and how dare they do this? I'm going to make all of them pay. I'm going to shoot them all in the face. He actually might have said that. He was that crazy. He could have said that. He probably didn't, but I won't put it past him. So 4 years later, we have 1828, and we are going to get ready to rumble. So going back to the common man, Jackson's supporters were really common, and Jackson knows this. So he made slogans of like, vote for Jackson who can fight and not Adams who can write. Basically, Adams is this big, wimpy, woman-like person, and you should vote for a man like you. And it works, not only because he was really popular already, but he puts ads out like this saying, hurrah, huzzah for General Jackson, down with the Yankees. Basically, kind of, he realizes that you have this narrative of the South versus the North, and that they're going to start fighting soon. And he starts to embrace it. And he starts to, realize that he's the champion of not only the South, but of Middle America. And they don't like the North. So he wins in a landslide. He absolutely destroys John Quincy Adams. Absolutely decimates him. Like literally, this is probably one of the bigger landslides in American history. You can still see that most of the North still supported Adams, a little bit of New York, a little bit of this area, but predominantly the country supports Andrew Jackson. And there's a reason for this as well. If I pull out my handy dandy book by JFK, John Quincy Adams does something really unpopular. I forget what it is, but yeah, I'll figure it out later. Anyway, so I want you to kind of look at this. We're going to look at a lot of these kind of election maps in the future. I want you to pause this video, and I want you to think, what does the map tell you about the election of 1828? Why do you think it is the way it is? What do you notice is different than other maps you've seen? So pause this video and come back to it in about 5 seconds. All right, so something that I've noticed was that there's no Florida, there's no Michigan. And all the Louisiana Purchase, a lot of it hasn't been taken yet. And some of these states have split votes, which is something you don't see nowadays. So I wonder why they split their vote and why like a perfectly even amount went one way versus the other in some of these areas, and maybe why they did that. So just kind of interesting to think about. Or why is this part, which includes New York City, so much more predominantly supportive of Jackson, whereas everyone on the other part of the northeast coast went Adams. Kind of interesting to think about. So here's what Jackson believes, and these are good things. These are very good things for a democratic nation. He believes that they should have term limits. You should not be able to be president for life. You should not be able to be a senator for life or a governor for life. So he pushes for representative term limits, and he pushes for shorter Senate terms so that there could be a little more turnover and people couldn't hold power and be as corrupt. He believes that the common man should have a lot of power. He believes that a new American needs to be able to have more power, and not in all political power shouldn't be in the hands of like 3% of the entire US population. So going back to kind of 2016, because I know a lot of you are very politically passionate, I want you to think about, would the common man vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? And I guess in today's world, this might be, instead of Hillary Clinton, it might be like Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden. Would they vote for one of those people, or would they vote for Trump, and why? Who embodies this common man idea more? So you can pause this, debate with your parents. I think it'd be a very interesting debate to have with them, and come back once you're done with that conversation. I'm going to keep going. Okay. I'm going to skip this. This doesn't mean anything now. Once again. So this is a video from Crash Course. I'm not going to sit here while you watch this. Oh, it's only a little bit. Okay, we're going to watch this. No, not same as system.
Second American president with a well-used nickname, and the first was his immediate predecessor, Andrew Jackson, or Old Hickory. Why does this matter? Well, when you're actually having to campaign for office, as all presidential candidates did after the election of 1828, and you're trying to appeal to the newly enfranchised common man, what better way to seem like a regular guy than to have a nickname? I mean, if you think this is crazy, just think of the nicknames of some of our most popular presidents. Honest Abe, the Bull Moose, the Gipper. Even our lesser-known presidents had nicknames. Young Hickory, Handsome Frank, Old Rough and Ready, Big Steve. James Buchanan, and I am not making this up, was Old Public Functionary. Who are you going to vote for? Oh, I think the Old Public Functionary. He seems competent. As it happens, he wasn't. So by now you're probably wondering, where does Andrew Jackson fit into all of this? When we last caught up with Jackson, he was winning the Battle of New Orleans shortly after the end of the War of 1812. He continued his bellicose ways, fighting Indians in Florida, although he was not actually authorized to do so, and became so popular from all of his Indian doing that he decided to run for president in 1824. The election of 1824 was very close, and it went to the House, where John Quincy Adams was eventually declared the winner, and Jackson denounced this as a corrupt bargain. So in 1828, Jackson ran a much more negative campaign. One of his campaign slogans was, vote for Andrew Jackson, who can fight, not John Quincy Adams, who can write. Adams supporters responded by arguing that having a literate president wasn't such a bad thing, and also by accusing Jackson of being a murderer, which, given his frequent habit of dueling and massacring, he sort of was. So as you can see, the quality of discourse in American political campaigns has come a long way. Anyway, Jackson won. Jackson ran as the champion of the common man, and in a way he was. I mean, he had little formal schooling, and in some ways he was the archetypal self-made man. Jackson's policies defined the new Democratic Party, which had formerly been known as the Jeffersonian Democratic Republic. So who Who were these new Democrats? Well, generally they tended to be lower to middle class men, usually farmers who were suspicious of the widening gap between the rich and the poor.
Okay, so we're going to kind of end there. The big point is that Jackson is a champion of this common man, and he gets a lot of popularity. So yeah, that's the whole lecture. So these are kind of the reasons that Jackson is sometimes considered to be a really, really good president, and why if he made America better. The next one of these videos is going to take a much different stance, where he's not that great of a guy, and we're going to learn all about the Trail of Tears, and we're going to learn all about the not so great things he did. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm going to try to keep punching these out. Might be a little difficult. Thank you for bearing with me in this time, and have a great rest of your day. If you took notes on this, I highly recommend it. If you want to watch the full episode of this crash course video, the title is right there. I highly recommend you do so. These are, honestly, I could be replaced by this YouTube series, like straight up. It's really good. He talks kind of fast. You may have to rewatch it a few times because the concepts are not front loaded for you as much. But awesome series. You should definitely take a look. All right, I'm signing off. Have a good rest of your day.